From Capitol Hill, a member of the Intelligence, Armed Services, and Budget Committees, Independent Senator Angus King of Maine. Senator, it's so great to have you here. It's surreal. We've been complaining about no regular order here, like I think most Americans who want Congress to work right. Now we're finding out that Republicans are getting angry at Bob Corker because he may call another meeting because he's concerned about additional $400–500 billion thrown onto the national debt. What's happening there?
Well, first let me put it in context. Joe, this may be one of the most important votes any of us ever take. We're talking about something that's going to affect every American business, the entire economy for decades, probably 20 or 30 years. And so you'd think in that situation that the care that went into creating the proposal and the bill would be extra good. Instead, it's the worst ever. I've never heard of or seen anything like this. On this huge bill, huge impact. You know how many hearings we've had on the bill? Zero, nothing, nada, zilch. And we're talking about voting on it today, Joe. We don't even know what the bill is. As of now, nobody can tell you what's in this bill. And it's going to be voted on sometime today, and we're talking about this gigantic impact. It's absolutely ridiculous.
That's unbelievable. Every bit as reckless as the way they tried to reorder Heidi 1/6 of the economy in healthcare.
Senator Heidi Presbella, what happens if this version, because we do know the general outlines of it, what happens if this version blows up? Corker can't get his trigger. We already know that's not going to happen because of parliamentary rules. So what is the next version of this look like? Because like we saw with the Obamacare repeal, it doesn't go away. It just keeps coming back in different iterations.
Well, here's the best case, that it does blow up, that it stops, that they can't get the votes. And then what might happen is what happened with the health care bill last summer. Later on in August, we started working on a bipartisan bill with Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray and Mike Rounds and myself and a bunch of others, and came up with a bipartisan bill sponsored by 24, 25 senators. And that's the way it ought to be done, and that's the way it could be done. I know there are at least a dozen, probably more like 20 or 25 Democratic senators in the caucus who want to do tax reform. But they want to do it in a targeted way that will, in fact, stimulate economic growth and not slant so much toward the wealthy, and do it in a way that everybody understands the implications. This is really complicated stuff. And that's why you have to have hearings, so people can come in from the outside, experts, and say, now, if you do this, it's going to have this effect. We're not looking before we leap off a 30-year cliff. I mean, it is. I said yesterday on the floor, the Bangor City Council wouldn't amend the leash law using this process.
Senator Donnie Deutsch, I'm missing something here, because the Republicans seem to feel that passing this bill is going to save the party and put them on the right track, yet every study shows that, in the most simplistic term, 2/3 of the benefits go to the wealthy. It's a redistribution of wealth. And if I was running Democrats' campaign in 2018, I couldn't wait to run against this. So I'm curious why they see the politics so in their favor here.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. And I've said to my Republican colleagues and said publicly, if I were a Republican senator, I would be very afraid of voting for this bill, because there's so many traps in it, and there are things in it that are going to come out over the next several weeks and several months. I thought it was very instructive in the House. When the bill passed the House, my understanding is the Republicans, as the vote came in, the Republicans started to applaud and cheer. So did the Democrats, because they saw this as an albatross for 2018. This, like I say, it's unbelievably complicated. I have a new rule, by the way. This is King's rule. The faster a bill goes through, the worse it is. And that's what's going on here. And as people learn, and that's one of the reasons I predict there'll be a vote today, because the longer the days go on, more people learn how really terrible this bill is. And of course, the real blow was yesterday when the sort of neutral umpire that looks at economic growth came out and said this thing would create 0.8% additional GDP in 10 years. You know, a couple of good summers can give us 0.8 of GDP over 10 years. And all of this drama is about improvement in the economy that can only be termed marginal, and it kicks a $1 trillion hole in the deficit.
Senator, your Democratic colleagues did a pretty masterful job around healthcare reform in killing attempts to repeal and replace Obamacare. They've tried some outreach with tax reform, but the phones aren't as jammed as they were over healthcare. So why is this not resonating with the public?
I think two reasons. Well, number one, my calls I check with my office pretty much every day, running about 50 to 1 against this bill. But I think the difference is time. The health care bill percolated for 3 or 4 months, and the pressure built up as people came to understand it better. That's one of the reasons this is going so fast. They don't want to slow it down, because the longer it goes, the more people will realize what the problems are, and it'll become even harder. There's no deadline here, where everybody's acting like there's a Christmas deadline or the New Year or something like that. There's no deadline for this. Nothing happens if you do it in January instead of in December. But I think the motivation is, as I told one of my colleagues last night, the longer this goes, the more people realize it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't hold together as a coherent piece of tax policy, and it'll lose support. But the difference between this and health care is, I think, just the passage of time.
Senator John Heilman here. I want to take you to a different topic. You're on the Intel Committee in the upper chamber. We have this report in the New York Times today that says that President Trump over the summer was pressuring the chairman of your committee, and as well as putting some pressure, or at least making some requests of Leader McConnell and others on the committee to shut down the investigation into Russia's activities in the 2016 election. First of all, do you know anything directly about the president trying to exert that kind of influence? And secondly, if the Times report is true, does that not look to you like another potential instance where the president is trying to obstruct justice?
Well, I think there's bad news and good news about that. Number one, I never got in one of those calls, so I have no direct knowledge. The bad news is the president shouldn't have done this. It was, I think, just incredibly inappropriate. It would be like calling up a jury in the middle of a trial or close to that. It just shouldn't have been done. The good news is, as near as I can tell, Richard Burr and the other folks on the committee who got those calls didn't pay much attention to them. I can't discern any change in the direction or momentum of the investigation after these calls came through, and I know Richard Burr pretty well, and I think he just moved on, and we're still interviewing witnesses, reviewing documents, and proceeding with our investigation. So yeah, it was inappropriate to make those calls. It adds to the impression of, if this is a guy who is as innocent as he says, why is he trying to shut down investigations? He ought to be giving all the information, all the cooperation, saying, yeah, we're innocent here and we're going to be vindicated. And instead, you get phone calls saying, let's get it over with.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator Angus King. We, as always, greatly appreciate you being with us.
Yes, sir.
And coming up,